Welcome to Sunday Inspiration. I'm Vicki Haddock. And I wanted to create a place for you to connect to your soul and understand that you can transcend all perceived limits in your life. I've learned that the faster you get past what's holding you back, the stronger you become and the braver you are at taking the next leap. And then the higher you rise and create more freedom than you dreamed possible. Connect to your soul's inner longing, be guided by it, and let go of the weight that's holding you back, and ignite the fire in your soul. What Eiffel Tower-sized thing does your soul want you to do? When you become fearless, you become limitless. Now, prepare to be inspired as I share this week's life journey of one person that has inspired me. Thank you for joining me this week for Sunday Inspiration. This week we're going to dive into the characteristics of toxic relationships and what they look like, how you can identify them more and be aware of them. And we're setting the stage for our next Sunday Inspiration is going to be an interview with an awesome gal, Sonia White. She's a conscious uncoupling coach who helps people unhook from toxic relationships. But I wanted to set the stage for that by diving into what does a toxic relationship look like. And there are a lot of different words and language that can be used to describe a toxic relationship. And I'm going to talk today about different ranges of what we classify as abuse. So when I look at, there are probably 5 major distinctive levels of abuse. This is just my own definition. This isn't any scientific definition, but I see there is verbal, emotional, spiritual. Actually, I'm going to change that to say there's 6. Financial abuse, where one person in a relationship is completely financially irresponsible to the detriment of the other person. And then there are other categories of abuse that I would classify as abuse against the physical person. So physical abuse and sexual abuse. So the reason that I'm going to deal with primarily verbal, emotional, financial, spiritual abuse today is because those are the forms of abuse that often seem insidious. Like we can't really identify whether something is happening or not happening. And that is so freaking dangerous. If you're experiencing sexual abuse or physical abuse, so that harm directly against your person, it's much more easy to identify, at least as a rational adult, to say, yeah, something happened to me that shouldn't have happened to me. Now, I know there are lots of ways where even on those levels of abuse where people become acclimated to accepting things where they don't know like what crosses the line and what not. And that's not the conversation we're going to have today. If you're experiencing those things, definitely I encourage you to reach out and seek some support and some help. But today we're going to be really talking about the types of experiences that we don't really know if they're happening or not happening. And that is what is so dangerous, because we end up putting up with it longer and longer and longer, and it steals a little bit more of our soul each day. Now, there are lots of labels that you hear in society today, and those labels could be, even the abuse label is one, right? So that is a label, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about my deeper belief on that. And the other labels that are common to hear are narcissism, narcissistic, codependency, any addiction type, can also be considered a label. But here's why I steer away from using labels. Now, you may occasionally hear me use some of those words as identifier words to help you draw and relate to something. But here's why I steer away from using those words on a typical basis, is because if we label something, then it becomes our adversary. It becomes us versus them. And it also sets us up on a pedestal of, I'm not that, so I'm something better than that. And here's what I really believe is that when hurt people, so as an adult or two adults in relationships, whether that's friendships, a parent, adult-child relationship, which is what I'm primarily talking about today, is adult relationships. Some of these experiences happen to you as children, whether you had a parent or were part of an organization or something that facilitated some of these things against you. As an adult, you still have a choice as to whether you're going to continue to identify with that and be a victim of it, or whether you're going to take responsibility for it. And that's where we get into this conversation about labeling, is if we're labeling things, it allows us to not take responsibility for it. And I believe in any situation, we have a hurt person and a hurt person. And if you are the hurt person who is experiencing some of that abuse, then there are hurts inside of you that are allowing you to do that. They're allowing you not to be able to stand up for who you are, to use your voice, to set boundaries, to experience standing up for yourself in these situations. So that is just as needs as much attention as the person who might be the perpetrator of these things. So when we talk about this, we always have to keep in mind that as adults, we have responsibility for where we're at. And with awareness, sometimes we don't have awareness. In my life, I didn't have awareness of my own role or even the role of what was happening to me. And so as I gained awareness, then I changed my actions, which changed the outcome. Okay. So we're going to talk about some descriptors today to help you understand and know, are you experiencing some of this or are you not? Or is there something other dynamic happening for you? And here's the thing, if you think that you are, you probably are. And the other piece of this is when we continually experience some of these situations, we can then actually turn around and be the perpetrator of these things on other people. And that can cause a lot of guilt, a lot of hurt for you as that person when you recognize that, wow, I experienced this from someone else and then I turned around and did it to another person. Maybe you're experiencing some verbal, emotional abuse from a partner, and then you turn around and perpetrate that to your children. Or you have experienced it from a partnership in the past, and now you're in another partnership and you actually are exhibiting some of those characteristics towards someone else. That is very common, and it's a defense mechanism. And again, it's just something we have to take responsibility for. So we're going to look at the 10 characteristics, I believe there's 10, of signs of that something has gone wrong in a relationship. And again, this can be a relationship, a partnership, a parent-child relationship, a parent-child as in an adult child to an adult child, or you might be the adult parenting the children, might be younger children. It could be in the realm of spiritual abuse, it could be an organization, a church, it could be a partner who has really embraced that they know what's best for you, or it could be something like a campus ministry or some other type of ministry or group that you've become part of that really just becomes very controlling. So that can look many different ways. And I'm going to be referring to some resources here today. So if you see me glancing down, I'm just checking in with my own resources. And then at the end of our conversation, I'm going to give you some additional resources to explore. So the general characteristic and categories of verbal, emotional, financial, spiritual abuse start with the fact of acknowledging that these things are hurtful. And it's especially hurtful when we deny that it's going on. So as we talk about this more and you think of that, wow, there's been times when I've either experienced that in the past or I'm experiencing it today. And here's the thing, if you have experienced that, there are scars or wounds that most likely need some attention and some healing. So the number one characteristic is we do not want to deny that it's happening. We want to acknowledge that it's happening, and we want to acknowledge that it is hurtful. Number two, these types of abuse attack the nature and the ability of the person that is experiencing them. So when I say that, it's an attack against the core of who you are as an individual. It's not saying that when you didn't communicate well, effectively with me tonight, I wish you would have communicated better with me. That's not the language that's being used. The language being used is, you are a bad person. There's something at the core wrong with you because you didn't do something in the way that I wanted you to do it. Okay? So verbal abuse, that is totally an opportunity for someone to jump in and use hurtful language that makes you feel bad at your core. It makes you feel wrong at your core. It makes you feel unworthy. In the financial abuse arena, if someone has gone out and ran up a credit card debt secretly, they have a hobby that is financially just sucking all the resources and they don't see how that's hurting the other person. When the partner questions that, they're going to most likely be attacked, and that other person could use language like, well, I never get anything that I want and you always get everything that you want. So you language, you always, you never, is a good identifier that these things are being attacked at the core. Oh, and this could happen in the workplace. Okay, it totally could be happening in the workplace. I have some experiences with a boss and a coworker where I've experienced these things. And again, it's easy to blame those other people, but really they're the lessons and the teachers there to reflect that something inside of you is ready to be healed and ready to step up. So, and here's the other thing. You might hear these things so often that you become to identify with them and believe that you are them. An example is, oh gosh, someone who accuses you of being, oh my gosh, you're such a lousy driver, or everything that you cook really is not good. Or it might be just the fact that when you sit down to a meal that you've worked hard to prepare, there's no appreciation for it. There's picking it apart of what's wrong with it. And those are signs of what I'm talking about here. So these types of abuse may be overt or covert. So if you aren't familiar with those words, overt means they're very, very, very obvious, and covert means they're kind of undercover. So another identifier is if these things, if when you're in public with other people, the partner or the parent or whoever it is acts perfect and doesn't exemplify any of these characteristics towards you, but in private, they are saying things against you, that's very, very, very common. That's very confusing and make you feel off balance and a little crazy. But that's another really big warning sign. But overt would be if they're doing and saying things in front of friends, in front of other people, if they're making fun of you, diminishing you, making you feel less than, making you feel, again, wrong at your core in front of other people. That would be an overt, where covert is doing that behind a closed door. And then even if it's behind a closed door, it can be overt or covert. So behind that closed door, it could look at like an angry attack, or it could look like subtle twisting language. Some of the language is the most crazy making that's more covert is denying. Like, no, I never said that. No, I didn't say we were going to do that. I said I maybe wanted to do that. You misread what I said. You misinterpreted what I said. You're too sensitive. You take everything wrong. Those types of things would be more covert, where they're not directly, maybe directly attacking something, but they're inferring something. Brainwashing, so brainwashing happens in many different situations, but the brainwashing is just when you become acclimated to something over time. It's like, I love the frog in the boiling pot of water analogy. I'm sorry, I mean no harm against the frog. But if you have a boiling pot of water and you drop a frog in, he is going to immediately jump back out. But if you put a frog in a cool pan of water and he's like, oh my gosh, this is so cool, this feels kind of good, and then it gradually begins warming up, then the frog's like, oh yeah, this is good. Yeah, it feels so warm, it feels right. Oh my gosh, this person is giving me so much attention, this feels so good. And then as the flame begins to turn up and you're comfortable and you're there enjoying this, then all of a sudden these red flags show up. And as the frog in that comfortable zone now, he doesn't really even realize that the temperature is being up until he becomes a boiled frog. Okay, so you don't want to become the boiled frog. Okay, sorry, that might be kind of a crazy analogy, but it's one that really works well for me in helping identify these things. So the next category of identifying this that we're going to talk about is what we would call comparing or demeaning, where one person is, this can be done really like politely, but it's really an insinuation that you are less than them, less than someone else. And it can go against your knowledge, your choice of friends, so many different ways that it can show up. Another way that isolation is one characteristic of any form of abuse, where if you are isolated and not able to share what's happening, then you don't really realize it. But how this particular comparing or demeaning shows up is if a partner is trying to isolate you from your friends or family, they're going to be really like demeaning against your family. Like, wow, they're such jerks. Why do you want to hang around with them? Or, I just don't know why you want to go visit that person, because I just really don't like them. I don't get along with them at all. So they're saying comparing but demeaning either you or someone else, and it's all in a manipulation way to manipulate So, and that's the next point that I was going to make. The next category is it is manipulative and it is controlling. And you often don't even realize that you're being manipulated and controlled. And I think the hardest day for me was realizing that someone who was manipulating and controlling me was doing that. They realized what they were doing. I was always making excuses saying, oh, they don't know what they're doing. No, I think he really did know what he was doing. And maybe not 100% of the time, but he had responsibility for his own actions. You might be living your life quite differently than what you planned, and it might all be because this person came in and, kind of gradually steered you in a different direction. One thing I want to add in here that is a way people manipulate and control is they're never happy, they're never satisfied, and it's always like, well, I want this, and if I get this, then I'm going to be happy, and they push for that so hard that you think, okay, let's do that. If that's going to make them happy, it's going to make them satisfied. And then when you do that thing, or when they have that thing, or you live in that place, or they have that job, pretty soon they're dissatisfied with that. And then they need or want something else to be satisfied. It is insidious. So it gradually diminishes your self-esteem. It gradually erodes your confidence. And you begin consciously or unconsciously trying to change your behavior to match up to what that person wants, to keep the peace, to keep the balance in the relationship. And you become kind of brainwashed without even realizing it. That's a word we don't like to use, but instead I would say that, we become very acclimated. We become accustomed to this level of behavior that really isn't acceptable. Back to the frog analogy, right? It's unpredictable. And that is the piece that keeps some people really hooked into this. So it might happen intensively, and then the partner or whoever it is apologetic, is like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to do that again. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that. I flew off the handle. I was, whatever. They have an excuse for why they did it and why they're never going to do it again. And then usually there's a period of happiness and, lesser tension. They might even go over and above and beyond to do things that are nice and make you feel good. And then all of a sudden the cycle starts all over again. And in that can be really crazy making for you, because when you're in the good times, it can feel so good, like, why, how could I ever have thought of walking away from this, or how could I ever think this wasn't good? And then all of a sudden the bad hits again. So if you've ever experienced that, then really, really pay attention. So the other way is identifying one person as the problem in the relationship or the situation. So if you think the other person is the complete problem, that other person thinks you are the complete problem, then that's a really big characteristic where people are not taking responsibility for their part in what's going on. And there's no willingness on the part of the other person to resolve it. So one person might want to resolve and improve the relationship, and the other person doesn't, and they're not taking any responsibility for it. Your kids too can be mirrors for this. If you are using some harsh language or experiences towards your kids, really intelligent kids, some kids will just accept that, but really insightful, intuitive kids will be able to say, why are you doing this? They can be the most intelligent voices in a family setting to say, yeah, why are you doing that? This is not healthy or right, what's going on. But often because they're kids, we diminish what they say, which again, diminishing, not respecting 100% what someone else has to say, that goes even for what your kids have to say to you. These type of abuse situations express a double message. So there's an incongruency against the way someone speaks and the way someone acts or causes someone else to feel. And oh my gosh, this is such a thing for me, because I'm so like firm about this in relationships, that actions have to equal words. And if you're telling me something and your actions don't show that, or your actions show something that you're denying or not saying, it's mixed messages. And that is unhealthy situation. So in a healthy relationship, we are able to express our words and our actions, and then we're able to make sure that those are congruent. Or if somebody calls us out and says, hey, you said this, but you did this, we don't have to get all defensive and angry about it. We can look at it objectively and say, oh yeah, you know what? I did say this and I did this. You know what? I'm sorry. Let me either redefine what I said or redefine what I'm doing so that they match. And then the final characteristic I want to talk about today is these things escalate in intensity. So if you are experiencing emotional abuse, verbal abuse, that over time is going to escalate. Very, very likely that it's going to escalate and will even possibly escalate into some of the more physical forms of abuse that we talked about. And again, the really insidious thing here is when it's physical and I have a black eye, I know that something happened to me. But when I have an arrow in my heart, it's not so easy to say and see that. So, but it's, black eye heals within a few days or a few weeks. An arrow in our heart might take a lot longer to do that. And of course, the black eye can also leave an arrow in our heart. But it's really easy for us to be able to tell someone else if they've experienced physical abuse or sexual abuse, to say, okay, you got to disconnect from that. You have to unhook from that. That's not good. You have to, report that, whatever. But it's much less easy to do that when it comes to the verbal, emotional, financial, spiritual forms of abuse. So those are some categories. There was 10 in all that we talked about in there. And if you feel like you're experiencing or you've experienced any of those, please reach out to me. I'd love to be a resource in helping you explore that and move forward. It's one of the reasons that I became a coach. And then also some other resources. The resource I was pulling from today is called The Verbally Abusive Relationship. Another resource that's been super helpful to me personally is called You Don't Have to Take It Anymore. That is by Dr. Stephen Stasny. There's another one called The Subtle Power of Spiritual Abuse. Any of these are going to give you some insight on all forms of this. And then the last one that I really want to recommend is The Language of Letting Go. If you have experienced any of these, this is going to really super help you. This particular one is a daily reading book, which gives you just bite-sized chunks which sometimes is all you can take in when your awareness starts to grow and your awareness of how you've maybe allowed some of these situations to happen. Your awareness starts to grow. Bite-sized chunks, daily bite-sized chunks are perfect. You can see I really enjoyed this as a resource in my own growth and learning. That's by Melody Beatty, and she also has some other books, The Language of Letting Go, and then Codependent No More. So highly recommend any of her resources. So that's a wrap for today. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. And if you've heard something today that made you increase in awareness, don't keep it to yourself. Don't feel like you have to be alone in this. reach out, send me a message, send me an email at vicky@tslimits.com, or at least reach out to a friend and say, you know what, I learned something today that made me a little uncomfortable or made me wonder about something in my own life. So thank you for being here, and I wish you the most happy rest of the day. And just know that if you are or have experienced these situations, that healing is possible. There is hope. And that's why I'm here today, because I've gone from experiencing almost all forms of this to living a really joyful, peaceful, abundant, happy, thriving life. So you can heal, you can recover. There is more out there for you. And I'm so excited that you're here and stayed to the end of this lesson. So we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.